Hey guys, so today, if you're not able to get on the Google Meet, um, this is just to go over kind of what we're doing in class um, and whatnot. So today's activity is the foundations of government. If you missed our lesson on Friday, um, it was about the Magna Carta and how at this point it's the year of 1215. Um, Prior to this, King John and multiple other kings before him had kind of shared powers with the nobility. So the nobility is essentially the rich people and people that were landowners. They were the influential ones. Now, I'm trying not to sneeze. Um, what had happened is at this point, King John tries to take the power from the nobility. So before this, the king essentially shares a little bit of his power. He doesn't want to make all the decisions. So they kind of give a little bit so that the nobles make local decisions and things like that. Well, King John's not that guy. And he's going to say, no, guys, I want to make all the decisions. I'm going to tax you more. I'm going to take your land. If you don't pay up, I'm going to hold your kids captive. Um, and that's kind of where we are. So these nobles, because they've had power before, they're going to kind of rise up against King John and they're going to say, no, this ain't going to work. And they force him to sign a document. That document's called the Magna Carta, and it translates to, in English, it's called Great Charter, which just means that it's a important, wonderful, very important document. So now we're going to fast forward a couple hundred years. And we still have issues where kings have a lot of power and they want to take more. And at this point, we have a style of government where it is a full, pretty much absolute monarchy, with the exception of where a group called Parliament has a little bit of power. Parliament is what we call now the lawmaking body. So essentially, it's kind of like a Congress. So at this point, the year is about 1688. We have a bunch of influential writers that are putting out some documents that are inspiring people to kind of rise up against their government. But at this point, at 1688, we have several civil wars happening. I hope you remember that a civil war is a war between a country. So for instance, the American Civil War was between the North and the South, where the South wanted to succeed, basically become their own country, and the North wasn't okay with that. And a lot of the problems developed because of slavery. Now, in this time, it's 1688. We don't have any of that at this point. We have colonists that are living here. We're not even an organized country yet. But in England, you have a civil war happening between parts of the group called Parliament, which is the influential lawmaking part that wants to have more power, and then the king. The king essentially just keeps on taking power and taking power, and they're trying to limit it. So a couple years before that, we have King Charles, and King Charles gets his head cut off by Parliament for trying to take more and more power. Now, it's 1688. I've said this multiple times because it's really important. In the year of 1688, you have a guy named King James II, who also is on the throne, still wants a whole lot of power. The Civil War happens. There's been multiple civil wars at this point, and Parliament in this instance is going to win. So Parliament is going to force King James II from the throne, and they're going to extend an invitation to his daughter Mary and her husband William to take the throne, to become King and Queen of England. But there is kind of a stipulation there. This transfer of power, if they take the power, they're going to have to agree that there are no rights that the king can violate. Meaning, if you have freedom of speech, the king can't take it away. If you own property, you have the right to own that property, and the king can't take it away. So this smooth transition of power, it's called the Glorious Revolution. You're going to hear this. You're going to see it on your study guide. The Glorious Revolution. It was just a calm transition of power from King James II, who was king, to his daughter Mary and her husband William. And there's no fighting at this point between King James II, William, and Mary. It just flowed. King James II leaves the position of king. William and Mary take over as king and queen. So William and Mary had to accept the rules of Parliament. They had to sign this. The rights set out by Parliament are things that we have today that we fully take advantage of, like the right to bear arms, cruel and unusual punishment. They can't do that. Freedom of speech, no taxation without Parliament's consent, meaning the government can't tax us unless we allow it. So, for example, this Alabama has a state gas tax, meaning whenever we had an election and we voted on this, it was presented saying, hey, 10 cents on the gallon, every gallon you pay an additional 10 cents. That 10 cents goes to road constructions to fix our roads, to make sure that our infrastructure, meaning roads and ways of transportation, are good. But if that gas tax had not passed and people had not approved it, we wouldn't have a gas tax. So when it says no taxation without Parliament's consent, that's exactly what that means. If we don't consent to it, if we don't approve of it, then you can't tax us. So those are things that are not only listed, some of them are in the Magna Carta, some of them are in the English Bill of Rights, but it gives us the foundation of our style of government. So your assignment today, we're going to look at, there's altogether 5 documents. We have the Magna Carta, we have the English Bill of Rights, the Mayflower Compact, Cato's Letters, and Common Sense. So you're going to click the link here, and it's going to bring you to this guy. Oop, let me zoom out. So you're going to start, this is page 1 that'll come up first. Just scroll down. All of our documents are on these 2 pages. You don't have to do the stuff down below. That's just the worksheet that goes along with it. I'm just taking the reading from it. So, for example, anything about the Magna Carta that you need is going to be found in this little bubble. Everything about the Mayflower Compact is right there. English Bill of Rights, Cato's Letters, and then Common Sense. So, right here, we talked about the Magna Carta. On your assignment today, it's going to say, when was it written? Your information will be found here in this document. So it says in 1215, they created a document called the Magna Carta. Who created that document? Angry nobles or just nobles. And why did they create it? So when was it created? Was 1215. Who wrote it? Was the nobles. What was the purpose of it? Why did they have to go towards King James II? No, King John. And why was this document created to begin with? And then down here, this is your big idea. What did we get from it? What inspired us? What do we have from it now? And those are things like limited government, where one person's not all powerful. The idea of due process, which means everybody gets treated equally in the court of law. There is a process, and if I get arrested and let's say John gets arrested for the same thing, there's a process that we have to adhere to. Like, there's steps. Everyone gets treated this way. This is what you're charged with. This is what happens. And then you go to court for it. So there is a process. That's why they call it due process, because everyone should have the same amount across the board. And then the last thing that they introduced to us is the rule of law, which just really means that there are laws and everyone should respect those laws. So that idea, those 3 ideas came from the Magna Carta. Then you're going to look for a meme. So you'll go into Google, and all I did was type in Magna Carta meme. And King John, when he had to sign the Magna Carta, because we know from what we talked about before that King John wasn't very excited about signing this document, that he was over it. So I'm going to put that meme in. The next page, we have the Mayflower Compact. Same thing here. You're going to scroll down. These should be in order. And then you're going to go a couple hundred years ahead of time. It's about 1620. And At this point, we've heard of the Mayflower. This is kind of why it's a big deal. Because what happens is there's a couple hundred people on board of a ship called the Mayflower, and uh-oh, they are coming to what we have, the colonies at this point. They're supposed to go to the Virginia colony, but there's a storm that happens, it knocks them off course, and they end up now in Massachusetts. So while they're trying to get to Massachusetts, Massachusetts doesn't have a government, they don't have anyone in control. So the Pilgrims would essentially be creating their own new territory. And they knew before they got off that ship that they needed to come up with rules that everyone had to listen to. Um, so they needed to create a new government, and they needed to create it quickly because they were about to land. And when people, you don't have anybody in charge, everybody wants to be in charge. So they came up with a pact, which is why they call it a compact, which is where all these people that were on this ship, they agreed that they would have self-government, which means that they would govern themselves. They didn't have to elect anybody, that as a whole, as a community, they would govern themselves. They would vote on matters. They would decide things as a group. Think of it as like a class setting. If we are making a decision and we all vote, we know that that's a pure democracy, but everybody votes. Everybody has a say so in government. So for the first time, it's actually in use, that idea of self-government, where you don't need a big fancy form of government to govern you. You can govern yourself. They created a new form of government that will serve the common good. That was the purpose. We talked about the English Bill of Rights. And then you have down here is Cato's letters, which is an anonymous person. They went by the name of Cato Elder and Cato Younger, and they're going to publish in newspaper articles. And they publish a bunch of them saying how they should discuss. Well, they discussed a whole bunch of different ideas like freedom of expression, or how the king is more heavy handed and trying to do more than what the government really allows him to do. So half of these letters were turned into like a book, and the colonists, it was all over the colonies, inspiring them to have free speech, have freedom of religion, have freedom of expression, because they didn't have that in the colonies. Because at this point, we're still controlled by Great Britain. Um, and then in 1776, it's January of 1776, this wonderful person named Thomas Paine, he writes a 47-page pamphlet. And in January till July, there's about 100,000 copies that are sold. And in the colonies, that's kind of a big deal. Because if you think about the number of people that back then couldn't read, there were 100,000 copies sold. And prior, in the 1800s, there was less than 1 million people that lived in the United States. So that's kind of a big deal. So 100,000 copies are sold. And in this document, in this pamphlet, which is like a little, like a notebook, and it just inspires people about getting freedom from the king, or declaring their independence, or how the king had done some unjustly things, how they weren't done correctly. So in the mid 1700s, you have representatives from a bunch of different colonies, and they're going to find options for the future. And then there you have a journalist, and his name is Thomas Paine, and he's going to write a pamphlet. And he's going to introduce these new ideas that are going to inspire people to rise up against the government that we had in the 1770s. This is a big deal because in this document and in this pamphlet, he's showing us ideas from European Enlightenment thinkers, like, which we're going to talk about tomorrow. People like John Locke, Rousseau, Machiavelli, and Thomas Hobbes. So what you're going to do is you're going to, in each of these, when was it written? Like what year? I don't need an exact date. Who wrote it? The name of the group of people or the person that wrote it. What was the purpose of it? What led them to write this document? Why did they do it? The big idea behind it, what concepts did it give us? Did it give us limited government, freedom of expression, freedom of religion, those sort of things? And then you're going to go into Google and you're going to type in Mayflower Compact, Magna Carta, any of these documents, and you're going to look for a meme. Like I said before, all your work is due Friday. So if you're not finished, like if you don't do it today, you're going to have an overabundance of work. Also, using your notes, you can still answer, I think, questions 15 and 16 and 17, maybe, on your study guide. Don't forget your study guide is due Wednesday. Like I said, if you guys have any questions whatsoever, please reach out. I do have office hours from 1 to 3:30. Nope, I think it's something like that. Just send me an email and I'll be happy to help you. Y'all have a great day.